Welcome to the Leather Journey. We're going to try a little bit different backdrop and camera setting for this video. It's been a little while. To catch you up on the book review series, where I'm reading through my Kinky collection of books for a second time. And then after I've read the book for the second time, I'm going to do a short book review on the channel and offer the book up to one of the subscribers. Actually, my patrons get first dibs. But to catch you up on that progress, the last book we reviewed was Kink, The Shocking Hidden Sex Lives of Americans by Susan Crane Bakos. And I didn't have a patron that asked for it, but I did have one of the subscribers raise their hand and say they wanted the book. Well, I don't want you putting your name and address in the comments on YouTube, so you need to write me privately at my email at AOL, or go on FetLife and write me on my profile and give me mailing instructions. But I'm still waiting for the person that raised their hand to give me mailing instructions so I can get this book out there to them. The next book I'm going to read is The Loving Dominant by John Warren. For those of you that have been in leather a while and been in the scene a while, John Warren was one of the early, I guess, founding contributors to the Boston Dungeon Society, or at least involved in the early days of the Boston Dungeon Society. Well-known BDSM educator, kink educator, traveled the country and taught at conventions. John had his PhD, and to my knowledge was adjunct professor in the Boston area. Don't know that much about his academic career, other than I don't think he was full-time, and I don't think he was tenured. But he wrote The Loving Dominant, and he wrote a couple of other books, and we'll get to those. But that's the next book I'm going to be reading. So what did I read for today's book review? This is kind of an interesting little book in the sense that if you collect, I don't want to call this pornographic, because I'm just going to say it's erotic stories. It's Adam and Eve Customers Tell All is the title of the book. And what it was back in the 80s, Adam and Eve, which is kind of a adult vibrator novelty company that was actually kind of probably more geared toward couples play, they put out a mailing catalog, and you could mail order from them. Now they're online, and you can go directly to their website and mail order, and they do have a couple of stores spread around. I think there's one in the Jamestown area of North Carolina, in fact. But back in the day, in the mid-'80s and even earlier, you were mail ordering from them, and in their order, they generally would throw in a freebie. You know, it might be a couple of condoms 1 month. It might be, you know, a little inexpensive vibrator from time to time. Some of that depended on how big your order was. But they, in the mid-'80s, they asked their patrons that wanted to get involved in this project to write an erotic story, one of their fantasies. So people that bought from Adam and Eve that were interested in doing this, sent in like short stories, erotic articles, fantasies that they had about sex, or maybe they played some of these out. But they were all printed as anonymous. So if you're a collector of erotic material, you might be interested in this. Another kind of interesting side note is in the very back cover, in very, very tiny print, you almost have to pull out the magnifier, It says, all materials were produced and completed prior to July 5th, 1995, and is exempt from the record-keeping requirements of 18 USC 2257 1 Charlie and CFR Part 75, which is the record-keeping materials that are required if you're producing adult or pornographic materials or content. So it's interesting. The copyright's 1985. Obviously, this particular copy was published after 1995. So once they produced this book in the mid-80s, they obviously reprinted it from time to time to include in a mail order that someone might do. So that's an interesting little side or backstory to the book. So what about the book? Well, you can see I didn't make it through it, and I don't intend to make it through it, but I will tell you about it and about what I read. They're all short stories. They're anywhere from 8 to 10 pages long in average length. There's about 20 stories in the book, little stories, and they're erotic. Some of them tickled my fancy and got me aroused reading them, and others were snorers because the fantasy in the story didn't match with anything that I was interested in. And every once in a while in the book, and I won't be able to show you this because this is YouTube, there'll be a black and white photo that's erotic, has nudity or partial nudity. So those photos would probably be considered vintage pornography at this point. Certainly by today's standards in pornography, this is really mild stuff. But in the time, in the mid-80s, these were pretty hot illustrations. So, Adam and Eve, Customers Tell All. It's a little fictional book. All of the stories are published as anonymously. There's a little foreword by the editor, and some of them will interest you, some of them won't interest you. If you enjoy reading erotica, you might want to raise your hand and say, I would like that book. If you collect vintage erotica collectors might be interested in this book. As always, thanks for watching The Leather Journey. If you have a copy of The Loving Dominant, that's the next book I'm going to be reading, you might want to read along ahead so that when I do my review of this book, you can go, yeah, I've read that book. I know what that book's about. Or if you're interested in the book, then look for that book review and raise your hand to tell me that you would like my copy of that book.